Red
Of
tuna
course not.
fricassee. Do you want to tell us more about it?
Okay, Mark, I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, we're in business. Tonight, I would like to look at the very end of the Parsha of Shlach Lecha. Let's put a text up. We're up. Okay. So at the end of the Parsha, it almost sounds prosaic. Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, b'nei Yisrael were in the desert, and they found this man who was doing something to sticks of wood on Shabbat. It seems very unclear what this Mekoshesh Eitzim was doing, whether he was chopping wood, gathering wood, let's just say gathering. So he was gathering wood on Shabbat. Vayikrivo toham motziim oto Mekoshesh Eitzim, and Moshe ve'el Aaron ve'el kol ha'edah. So they brought him because he's clearly violating Shabbat. He needs adjudication. So they bring him to Moshe and Aaron and the entirety of the people. That's the simplest explanation. And of course, in the due course of time, he is executed. There are a number of simple issues to ask here. First of all, why am I being told they're in the desert? Where else could they possibly have been? And the Netziv is going to ask, why does it say that he's brought to Moshe and Aaron? The way the Netziv words it, in the words of the Pasuk here, Kilo farash ma ye'aselo, because it was not yet spelled out how he should be treated. The Netziv asks, if Moshe doesn't know, why would there be any expectation that somehow Aaron would know? Okay, but before we get to the Netziv, let's look at Rashi. Vayu b'midbar, vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, vayimtzeu. Rashi brings the Medrash Halacha. B'gnutan Yisrael diber katuv shelo shamru el Shabbat rishona v'shniya b'zeh v'chilila. This pasuk comes to denigrate Bnei Israel, that in the course of the desert period, they had only kept the first Shabbat. By the time we get to the second Shabbat, this person violated Shabbat. So it's as if all of Bnei Israel did not keep Shabbat. It's a difficult idea. Think about what Rashi's saying. Rashi is saying that the story that is before us takes place 3 weeks after they left Mitzrayim. Yet it is positioned here in our Parsha a year and a quarter later. Now, that may well be true, but then we have to ask ourselves, then why are we being told now? Okay? So Rashi, without even making a big fuss about that's what he's doing, has positioned this story as being out of place. Continuation of Rashi, HaMekoshesh, Motzim Oto Mekoshesh, Hitru Bo V'lo Hiniach Min Lekoshesh, Ad Shemetza'unhu V'hitru Bo. They warned him that he may not be doing what he was doing, but he did it anyway. Kilo farash me'aseh lo. They knew that he was to be executed. They just didn't know with what form of execution. Now, there's an internal contradiction here in Rashi, which no one really addresses, which is that if we are talking about that second Shabbat in the desert, then it is definitely not plausible that they knew that he needs to be executed. So we're gonna have to deal with that. Okay, so we can deal with that. Take it rather shortly. Okay. Let's go back to here.
Can I just ask, Nachum,
Please, yes.
what made anybody suggest that it's the second Shabbat after they left?
Okay, I was gonna get to that later, but let's jump to
Okay,
that
no,
now.
all right, so
No,
do.
let's jump to that now. This word, Bamidbar. Vayu b'nei Yisrael Bamidbar. And you say to yourself, well, where else could they be? I hinted at it. Well, of course they're in the desert. So it doesn't say Bimidbar, but it says Bamidbar. And that seems to be a reference to their first exposure to the desert in Parshat B'Shalach. So that seems to be the trigger. And we're going to get back to this debate about where we are, even though you might say it doesn't matter. We're going to get back to that. Okay, but that seems to be the issue. And the second half is Kilo Farash Me'aselo. At any point after the Torah is given, they know very well what the punishment is, as it says in Parshat Ki Tisa, Ushmartem et HaShabbat ki kodesh hi lachem mechalelei hamot yumat. So that's overt. By the time the Torah is given, they know it's a capital crime. Yet here, it seems not to be. So Rashi brings that's why Rashi brings the seemingly strange explanation, Kilo frash meyaselo be'eze mita yamut. But that's a problem, because if we're talking about pre-Sinai, then they wouldn't necessarily know that there's such a thing as capital crimes. Okay, Ramban, Kedarko Bakodesh, Ramban is very consistent internally. Unless there's a very good reason to suggest that the parsha is out of place, then we assume the parsha is not out of place. And as Ramban says, in other words, immediately after the discussion of the spies and the aftermath of that tragedy, we have the story of the Mikoshesh. Why? On the simple pshat level, why does the story appear now? Because it occurred now. Okay. So we've laid the background for the story. That's all Ramban has to say, by the way. He disagrees with Rashi, but he doesn't bother explicating it. He doesn't give it in his own answer. He simply says, Al derech hapshat, it appears here in the text. This is when the story appeared chronologically. And then the Netziv gives a wonderful essay, okay? I am not trying to present what the Netziv is doing here as pshat, because it most certainly is not pshat. But it's a wonderful essay, and then there's another one following. I want to look at those essays because I so much enjoy his creative thinking. And then I will make some vague attempt to justify them on a pshat level as well. So here's his essay. He's focusing on, it says, Moshe el Moshe ve'el Aaron. What answer could Aaron possibly give that Moshe couldn't give just as well? The question assumes a certain hierarchy. And we're going to see from the Netziv's answer is that he is to some degree rejecting that hierarchy. Moshe Rabbeinu has no comparison. There is no one who achieves his erudition and his understanding of the Torah and his analysis of the Torah. Nevertheless, there is room for Aaron to make a contribution, and even the El Kol Haidah to the rabble who surrounds him as well. Now, the Netziv, I didn't quote it here, but the Netziv says about this El Kol Haidah, it doesn't mean literally what we normally think it means, the entirety of the assembled masses, but he says it is the students who surrounded the Sanhedrin, the aspirants to being members of the Sanhedrin who might, in a moment of brilliance, actually have something to contribute, but he's rejecting the idea that it's the entirety of the people. Anyway, the Netziv opens with the question, El Moshe v'El Aaron. And he says, HaPerush HaRegil hu sheyashvu b'yachad, k'mo b'Parshat Pesach Sheni u'v'not Sof Chad. The standard explanation is that Moshe and Aaron were sitting together because that's just what they did. And indeed, we see in other stories, such as when, let's say it's Mishael and El Tzafan, they come in the aftermath of the story of Nadav and Avihu, and they come to complain that they are being deprived of the opportunity to participate in the Pesach holiday because they are Tmei Met. So they come to complain to Moshe and Aaron. And the daughters of Tzlofchad, they come to complain that they are being deprived of an inheritance. They don't have any brothers. They're not so much complaining that they're being deprived of an inheritance, but their father is, in effect, now dead, not having sons, is being deprived of an heir because daughters can't inherit. So they come to complain to Moshe and Aharon. And the Netziv does something interesting. He says, you can't compare these cases, this case to those cases. Those cases where law needed to be determined, but Moshe and Aaron can sit together on whatever Beit Din is sitting in judgment, and they can give those judgments. But here, in the case of the Mikoshesh Eitzim, the wood chopper, this is a capital case, and they cannot sit together. Let's see it in his words. In any situation where a single judge is qualified to sit in judgment, then two brothers or a father and a son or any other relatives are able to sit in judgment together. And in cases like that, where if there's disagreement with the judges and they're voting and they're counting, so each of the two brothers count separately because those are not capital cases. Keditani b'Sanhedrin, and it says it in the Gemara. Aval kan b'dinei nefashot, ein monim lahem ela echad. They only count as one vote because in capital cases, relatives may not sit on the same conclave. Rashi Sham Hevi Tosefta. Lo Yeshev B'tzido Afilu Shotek. Not only can they not both be members of the panel of judges, the brother may not sit in proximity to his brother who is a member of the panel, even if he's sitting silently. El Yamod Volechlo. He needs to step away. So that's the halacha. Two brothers cannot sit in judgment together in capital cases. Ve'im ken, kasheh halashon al Moshe ve'Aaron. So if so, why did the people bring the Mikoshesh to Moshe and Aaron? They can't both be sitting in judgment. Now, this is sort of anachronistic. Even assuming that the halachot of Sanhedrin were known to Moshe and Aaron, we can't assume that they were known to the people. The people would have brought the sinner to Moshe and Aaron in any case and wouldn't have started making the calculations. Well, it's a capital case. We can't bring him to the boat together. We'll bring him just to Moshe. It's a little strange. Ella, but this is a drasha. This isn't pshat. Ella ha'inyan de Moshe ve'Aaron hayu shnei rasei sanhedriyot kol echad b'koach acher. Here the Netziv is going off on his own. He's making it up. Moshe and Aaron each independently sat at the head of their own judicial panel. There were two Sanhedrins. I wouldn't use the word competing. They existed in parallel. Dikva biyarnu hadichtiv Parshat Shoftim, because it says in Parshat Shoftim, ki palei mimcha davar ben dan l'dan ben din l'din ben negel l'negel v'alita el hakohen asher yebeh memhem o el hashofet asher memhem The Torah tells us that when they've moved into the land and they've settled in their tribal allotments, and now there are questions of law that come up, they will come to the Mikdash in Yerushalayim, or they will go locally, and they will come before the Kohen or before the judge. And then it's even saying, wait a second, what kind of judicial process is this? What kind of way is this to give psak? Do I go to the Kohen or do I go to the judge? Let's say Shofet is a judge. I'm confused. Who am I supposed to go to? I have a choice. I get to choose my jurisdiction. D'chol din she'ino mekubal mikvar nechtach al pi shnei ofanim. And it says in Tiv, that's exactly right. You have a choice of where to go to with your questions. The first, b'derech dimui milta lemilta uva b'svara, v'zehu hora'ah hapshuta sheba'a l'sha'a. He says the first choice is you go to the local rabbi who compares previous cases, and he uses what he's calling svara, rational thought, and he comes to a judgment, lisha'a. We'd call this case law, okay? He's not establishing precedent. He is simply comparing previous laws and saying, in my judgment, what we should do is X. And that's the end of the story. The second option, al pi ha'achreach, b'chlalei ha'talmud v'pilpula. V'hora zeh na'aseh mishnah v'halacha ledorot. The other option is you go to what seems to be a more senior authority who will use the rules of deriving halachot from the Torah, what we call today the midot shetorah nidreshet bahem, or whatever other tools they have. And not only are they going to answer your question, but they are going to establish a new law. This is, I think, closer to constitutional law. Mishum hachi ktiv sheyavo el hakohen, or to the shofet. So now we have to ask ourselves, which of these is the kohen and which is the shofet? So in the precedent that we have before us, I think it's clear that the Netziv is suggesting that the kohen is Aaron, and he is the one who gives case law by analyzing and comparing to previous cases. And Moshe is the shofet, who delves into the sources of the halachot in the Torah. And when he does so, he establishes new halachot for everyone for all time. ואם היו מחולקים בספרה, וכהן גדול הוא הגדול בהוראה תכתיב יום משפחת יעקב, והם היו מחולקים בדרך הפלפול וחקרו יבואו אל השופט. If the disagreement is simply how to rule based on previous cases, well, then go ask the Kohen. And if it's about establishing new principles and they can't agree on how to do that, so then you go talk to the shofet. And then he continues explaining. B'nei b'midbar haya Moshe Rabbeinu rosh hanhedrin b'derech pilpula shel Torah, ki de'ita b'nedarim, lo nitna Torah el Moshe, u'masiku l'pilpula ba'alma. V'aron haya rosh hanhedrin b'hora'ah, dichtiv l'horot et b'nei Yisrael. It says specifically that the Kohen gives hora'ah. So there are two types of halacha. There's case law, there's constitutional law. There's comparing to previous cases, and there's establishing new principles. I think looking at the Netziv was, for more than 40 years, the Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin. I think the Netziv, without saying so, is talking about the tension that has always existed between the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshivot, and the local rabbis. Who has precedence? Now, for much of history, there was a lot of overlap. The local rabbi would often start his own yeshiva, but that only lasted for as long as he was the local rabbi. There's always been this tension between the rabbis and, shall we say, the academics, the Rosh Yeshiva. And if we look at the Torah that they have generated over the years, we'll notice that the poskim, the local rabbis, are always trying to make believe that they're not saying anything new. They're always trying to say, and what I'm saying takes its precedent from what someone else already said. The local rabbi, when giving psak, is never looking to say something new. He's always trying to say, hey, everyone else said it before me. I'm merely applying the case. Whereas Rosh Yeshiva are always trying to be mechadesh, to give in their brilliant shiurim, showing nuances and new insights, and not necessarily saying what they're saying in the world of halacha, but halacha ve'en morim ken, and they're not much concerned with halacha l'maaseh. They're looking to categorize and say something new. And I think the Netziv is highlighting these two different approaches to halacha. Now, obviously, there's going to be overlap because, like I said, many of the poskim were Rosh Yeshiva, and many of the Rosh Yeshiva were poskim. And the writings, these chidushim, often end up being incorporated into normative halacha. But the Netziv is showing us that there are two different and completely legitimate parallel tracks to deriving halacha. So we've got Moshe and we've got Aharon. Okay, we already said that. Okay, v'chasher haya safek b'din ha'mekoshesh b'ferush ha'mikra kol ha'oseh melacha b'yom ha'shabbat mot yumat הביאו הספק לפני משה, אולי יגיב בדרך חקירה מיוגים ממויות, וגם אל אהרון אולי יתברר לו על פי סברה. מה שכתוב בספר דברים. So, what the Netziv is suggesting is that the people brought the case to Moshe in his court, to Aaron in his court, and there was no problem that they were going to two different courts with the same question. Let them work it out among themselves. There are two parallel tracks on how we derive halacha. Okay. When I first was reading this, and I'm thinking to myself that it's almost completely unjustifiable. How can the Netziv try to say that this is what these psukim mean? And I think it's safe to say that he's not saying anything of the sort. He knows very well this is not what the psukim mean. He knows very well that this is a drasha and not pshat in the psukim. And that's fine. But I'm going to try to circle back to it later to try to show maybe that it's justifiable anyway. Okay. As long as we're looking at the Netziv and allowing him to ramble with his essays, and we have to remember the perush and the Netziv that we have for the Torah isn't really a perush. It's an assembly of the shiurim he gave in the yeshiva. It's not intended to be a systematic perush. So in effect, it's a collection of essays. So that's fine. So on the last words in the parsha, we have the end of the Kriyat Shema, the parsha of Tzitzit, and at the end it says, so twice it says, Ani Hashem Elohechem, Ani Hashem Elohechem. Why do we have this doubled language? And what is it coming to teach us? And also earlier he's writing on less pasuk, but he's also asking about the meaning of the pasuk, two psukim earlier, v'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei lechem eshetem zonim achareihem Lo taturu, you shouldn't wander after your eyes and use them to follow your lusts. And he says, V'lama ne'amar lo taturu. And he's going to say something that again is clearly not pshat. Everyone understands lo taturu, and why is it here at the end of Parshat Shlach Lecha? Because the beginning of the Parsha is talking about the spies, and they're not called spies, right? They're called hatarim et haaretz. These men who were surveying the land, and then when they come back, asher taru et haaretz, and they say haaretz asher taru ota. The verb appears there over and over again. So here in the Parshat Tzitzit, it appears again. Do not follow your eyes and be led astray like the Meraglim were. So too, you need to control your thoughts and control your behaviors. That's how everyone understands it. Says the Netziv, I want to say something creative. So he has this. He says that we do not all serve God in the same way. There are people, people are different. Some people sit and learn Torah all day. Another person goes off. Avodah here doesn't mean to work, but rather it means Avodat Hashem. We can see from the continuation that clearly that's what it means. Some people sit and learn Torah. Some, right? He's got Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. It means Avodat Hashem. So some people sit and learn Torah all day, and some people do Avodat Hashem. They do all sorts of things. They do Gemilut Chasadim. That's another track. And he's not against people working, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about Avodat Hashem. How does one do Avodat Hashem? So some people learn, and some people pray, and some people do Chasadim, and obviously everyone is going to be a mix of all the above in his own way. V'akol l'shem shamayim, and that's fine. Each person will do it his own way. V'gam Torah atzma ein kol derech limud shaveh. V'gam maseh mitzvah, right? Because some people are going to focus on Shabbat, and some will focus on tzitzit, and some will focus on pick your favorite mitzvah and focus on that mitzvah and do it perfectly. And the Gemara actually says, "Kol oseh mitzvah achat metivin lo umarchin lo et yamav." Do one mitzvah, and you become eligible for Olam Haba. And then the Yerushalmi quotes Rabbi Abun, "Mishi yeched lo mitzvah v'lo avar aleh me'olam." Who is it? Ben Olam Haba? Someone who has focused on one mitzvah and has never failed, never sinned in that mitzvah, because he's made himself a specialist there. And he continues. If a student comes, someone comes and asks the rabbi, what's the best way to serve God? Give me a path. Tell me what I should be doing. There must be one correct way. What should I be extra careful about? It says in Kohelet, Balach b'darkei libecha. You need to follow your heart. Masha libonim shach acharav. You need to do the mitzvot that you're drawn to. Baru שמזלו חזי כי זה עניין טוב לפי כוח נפשו ועל זה כאמר או בדרך שתרצה. It's all the answers are acceptable. Now he's going to qualify that. אפילו מה שאינו בכלל מצוות התורה כלל, רק שהוא עושה לשם שמיים ודבקות באלוהיו, הרי זה טוב. But the problem is there are people who think, as long as I'm doing things in the right spirit, I mean well, and I'm doing it l'shem shamayim. Says the pasuk, Lo tatur achrei levavchem. Yes, we want you to follow your heart. We want you to do the mitzvot that speak to you in the modern parlance. But it needs to be within the context of the Torah that we were given. Shelo techapsu mitzvot chadashot, ma sheino al pi haTorah, v'lo nichlal b'mitzvat tzitzit, because everyone knows that tzitzit is supposed to add up to 613. In other words, there is no room for adding new mitzvot. Within the context of the mitzvot that we have, pick the ones you want to focus on. Keep them all. That's not the question. But you want to focus and make yourself a specialist in a certain mitzvah. That's a wonderful thing. That's a desirable thing. That makes you a ben olam haba. That doesn't give you the right to make up new rituals, new rites, new methodologies of worship, new customs, new things to wear, new things to say, new things to do. There's no room for that at all. He says, why is the Parsha here remind us of Mitzrayim? Because they were in Mitzrayim, they didn't have Torah and mitzvot. And therefore, they didn't really have the proper ability to serve God. And therefore, they didn't even have proper hashgacha. God did not have the relationship with them that they subsequently had when they had mitzvot, because then God is able to give them the proper kind of hashgacha pratit that comes from being able to truly tie into the divine desire. So here the Netziv is saying, and can we really argue that this is pshat in Parshat Tzitzit? That Lo Taturu is telling us something along the lines of Baal Tosef, you're not allowed to add new mitzvot. I mean, yes, you're not allowed to add new mitzvot. And the Tziv was very famous for being strongly against the new customs of the Hasidim and the new ways of singing and dancing and all those things. And he's very outspoken in opposing them. But and I agree with everything he's saying. But I don't think we can argue that this is pshat. That's what the psukim are telling us. Okay. So I presented two, I think, fascinating essays from the Netziv, and I like them a lot, and they seem not to be pshat, but they're wonderful. I want to go back to the beginning. The beginning, we were saying, is this the first Shabbat or the second Shabbat in Parshat Shlach? Or is this a year and a quarter later after Chet HaMeraglim? If we are to argue, like Rashi does, that we're referring back to Parshat Shlach in the desert when they immediately left Mitzrayim, we have to ask, so why are we being told this now? I'm inclined to accept Rashi's argument. There are some reasonable internal explanations why that should be so. The Bamidbar, the Kilo Farash Mayaselo, these do definitely speak to this being those first Shabbatot. But then why aren't we told? We're told, or in Parshat Shlach, it is not kept a secret from us that there were people who went out intending to gather manna on Shabbat. They are not punished because they failed in their attempt to be Mechalel Shabbat. There was no man to gather, so they can't be punished. But God expresses his displeasure to Bnei Israel, and Moshe passes it on to Bnei Israel. God expresses his displeasure to Moshe, who passes it on to Bnei Israel. Why aren't you listening to God? He told you not to go out and try to collect man on Shabbat. But they didn't, in point of fact, collect man on Shabbat because there wasn't any. But what Chazal are trying to argue, and Rashi brings as his parish, is that the story here in Parshat Shlach Lecha actually took place a year and a half ago in Parshat Shlach. And if so, why is the story recorded here? I think the answer, assuming this is true, that the mindset of the Mikoshesh Eitzim, this Mechalel Shabbat, is in some way reminiscent of the mindset of the Meraglim. And you say, I don't get it. one guy is being Mechalel Shabbat, and one guy is refusing to conquer Eretz Yisrael. And I don't mean that they're both violating God's word. I mean that too is true, but I don't think that that's the real issue. Before I try to answer that, I want to look later in the parsha. We have later in the parsha, after Bnei Israel are told that they're going to be punished and going to spend the next 40 years in the desert, the Psukim tell us Moshe informs Bnei Israel of God's plan to punish them 40 years in the desert. They were quite duly saddened, as well they should be. Vayashkimu v'boker vayalu rosh hahar lemor hinenu va'alinu el hamakom asher amar Adonai ki chatanu. They got up early in the morning. They climbed to the mountaintop and declared, okay, we're going to the place that God told us to go, for we have sinned. Now, there's something a little anomalous about the pasuk. It should have started with chatanu, right? The first thing you say is, I acknowledge I've sinned. But it's almost an afterthought here. But they say, okay, we're going. And Moshe says, where do you think you're going? You can't do this. It won't succeed. God will not be with you, and you'll be routed by your enemies. And in point of fact, the Canaanite and Amaleki, they're waiting for you with swords, and God will not be with you. And they refuse to listen. Vaya'apilu lalot rosh hahar. Hence we call them the ma'apilim. V'aron brit Hanoi Moshe lo mashu mikarev ha'machaneh. Moshe and the Aron Hashem, they don't travel in this battle. Vayered ha'amaleki v'aknei hayoshev bahar vayakum vayaketum ad ha'chorma. I don't know if Chorma is a place, which it might be. Either way, it means destruction. So if it's a place, so after they were destroyed in battle, that place was known as Chorma. Or maybe it's just a description of what happened to them. They were whacked until there was nothing left of them. And I think it's not implausible to suggest that a huge fraction of Bnei Israel who were doomed to die in the desert died that day right up front in the 40 years, trying to conquer the land. And what I want to suggest here is that we're done with this. What I want to suggest here is that the sin of the Meraglim and the sin of the Mapilim are one and the same in its own twisted way. What do I mean by that? What is the sin of the spies and the people that followed them? They were commanded to go to the land. And they said, despite the divine command to go to the land, they're afraid. So their sin is a sin of cowardice. We can add other things in. For example, that they said, Nitna rosh v'nashuva Mitzrayim. It's not just that they don't want to go to the land. They want to go back to Mitzrayim. There's a complete lack of faith that God will lead them through this crisis. They do not believe that even with God's assistance, they can accomplish their goal. The Mapilim, to a very large degree, is the exact opposite. The Mapilim seem to believe that even though God will not be with them, they can conquer the land anyway. So now it's the absolute mirror image of what we had before. The Meraglim didn't want to go even with God helping them. And the Mapilim are saying, Even without God, we're going to do it on our own. So if they're opposites of each other, in what sense do I say they're the same? In the sense that they are both denying the concept of hashgacha. They're denying God's leadership. The Meraglim are saying, God's leadership doesn't help me. The Mapilim are saying, I don't need God's leadership. Both of them are denying the role of hashgacha and leading them through this crisis. Which brings me to the Mikoshesh. Bear with me here. The Mikoshesh is also denying the role of God. The Mikoshesh is committing a sin similar to that of the Meraglim or the people who are following the Meraglim who say, Nitna rosh v'nashuva Mitzrayma. Let us appoint a leader who will take us back to Mitzrayim. Their problem isn't just that they've abandoned God. I'm not even sure they have abandoned God. What they're saying is, I've made a calculation. My calculus is the following. I'm going to weigh, using my own judgment, the appropriateness of following God and following the Torah. I do my risk-benefit analysis, and I think I'm better off going back to Mitzrayim. I'm not going to Canaan. Not because it's right, not because it's wrong, not because God commanded, not because it didn't command. It's just not right for me. The math doesn't work for me. And the Mikoshesh is sort of doing the same thing. The Mikoshesh is saying, I'm very well aware that Shabbat is being given as a commandment, but no one's going to catch me. I'm not worried about God. I'm going to gather wood on Shabbat because I need wood on Shabbat. I need wood for right now. I have my existential crisis. I have to fry my eggs. I need to gather wood. And he makes a calculation. It's worth it to me to gather wood and take my chances with Shabbat. And if that's what's happening here, then it's entirely appropriate to stick the story of the Mikoshesh out of its chronological place in Parshat Shlach and stick it here in Parshat Shlach Lecha, because that's a parallel manifestation to the thought process of the Meraglim. They're calculating whether it pays to follow the word of God. The Mikoshesh is calculating whether to follow the word of God. The Ma'apilim are calculating whether they need God with them or not. I've created some sort of A equals B equals C, and then C goes back to being equal to A. I'm not sure it stands up to a really rigorous analysis, but let's think of it as a drush and not necessarily as pshat, though I'm reasonably sure that there are elements of pshat here as well. Okay, so in theory we're finished, but I sort of promised somehow to use all this to justify what the Netziv was doing. I'm not sure I can do it. The Netziv is looking at the big picture here. I think the Netziv is agreeing with Rashi that this story is taking place before Matan Torah. I can't be sure, but I think he's agreeing with Rashi. He doesn't say. And if so, then what the Netziv is saying is that indeed, A equals B equals C back to being equal to A. That the spiritual failings of the Mikoshesh and the Meraglim and the Mapilim are one and the same. And therefore, this story belongs here. Now, what does that have to do with splitting up the leadership between Moshe and Aaron? I think there's much more room to suggest that in a pre-Matan Torah world, that there's no particular reason to prefer the halacha of Moshe over the halacha of Aaron. The Torah hasn't been given. So Aaron is giving his psak halacha based on his gut feeling, his svara, and Moshe is trying to derive from deep principles. And to me, that makes a lot more sense in a pre-Matan Torah world. Yes, the Netziv suggests that that's the way it worked, because in Parshat Shoftim, when it's talking about when they're living in the land, and he's giving them two parallel tracks, they can go to the Kohen or to the Shofet. I haven't really tied all the loose ends together, and maybe I shouldn't even try. But I'm very happy with what the Netziv says as a drasha. I'm happy with his second drasha as well. And on a pshat level, I hopefully in Parshat Dvarim will be able to compare and contrast the stories of the Meraglim and the Mapilim as told in Parshat Shlach Lecha and compare them to the way it's done in Parshat Dvarim, because to some degree, they don't even sound like the same story. And over there, I think we can get closer to the idea of pshat. So we'll deal with that then. Okay, now I can unlock everyone's microphones, I think. Good. Okay, questions, comments, drinks. Okay, let's turn off the recording.